So what's up, everybody? Today I'm going to do kind of a basics video. I was helping a buddy of mine who just started to get into photography the other day. Like, he literally bought a camera like not even like 2 months ago, and he's been hitting me up asking about some basics. So I wanted to make this video. Hopefully it'll help him, hopefully it'll help you guys, hopefully it'll help anybody that's really just starting to get into automotive photography or wants to get into all of this stuff. And I'm just going to go over a bunch of stuff, like just general basics and that type of stuff. This is, again, more meant for the person who's just getting into automotive photography, or maybe, you know, you just want to brush up on some skills or something like that, or some just general knowledge. So I'm going to kind of work my way a little around, like from the beginning to the end, I guess, or to the middle. So up first, you know, I just want to talk to people about camera stuff. I know a lot of people always focus on gear, like right when they first get into photography, and they'll actually make the excuse that they need X, Y, or Z to get into, like, you know, to be good or do this or do that. When I started out, or, well, not really started out, but when I started shooting for magazines, really, I was doing a lot of car stuff, like a lot of car features and stuff, and I was literally doing it with a Canon T2i and a 50mm 1.8 lens. This is literally like, you can get these all together for like 300 bucks now, like floating around on Craigslist and stuff. These lenses are like brand new. They're like 100 bucks. It's like called a Nifty 50 if you're not familiar with it. They obviously have like much more expensive versions of the 50mm. You can get like a Sigma Art 50, which is like $1,000, or like the Canon 50 1.4 that's actually got a better build on the body. It feels like a aluminum or metal kind of feel, and it's like, that's like 400 bucks, something like that. You can kind of, you know, like anything, it varies and stuff, but you can literally start with something like this and get yourself going, you know. And then we have like other options. Obviously you can get into like something that's like full frame. It's like a, you know, this is like a Canon 60. This is a little more expensive now. They're they're used. You can get them used. This is a Mark 1. You can get them used for under $1,000, floating around too. Or, you know, like you can get yourself like into the Sony stuff. This is like an entry-level Sony. This is a 5100. It's got like a kit lens that's got like zoom. It's got a, you know, flip out monitor. There's no viewfinder in it, but these cameras will do everything the same. I believe all of these shoot in RAW as well. Even my little point and shoot, I have like a little point and shoot right here. This thing shoots RAW too. And then, you know, like, and I'm filming on a mirrorless, but you can, it literally doesn't matter. You can film on any, I mean, you can shoot photos on anything. It's just a matter of getting out there and shooting. I mean, try not to make the excuse early on that you need gear to do everything, you know, and that's the first hurdle you need to get over to like really get things going. And then let me start breaking down like some of the stuff now. Just like in general, I'll go through like the creative modes. Just to, you know, like most people just resort to P, which is program, that kind of does everything for you. It sets the exposure, the shutter speed, the aperture, and the ISO. And that kind of just takes all the creativity out of it, I guess you could say, or the real control out of it. And so, like, you know, as we're getting there, I mean, I'll explain a little more of that after, but in terms of terminology, shutter speed, which is like on like Canon is like TV mode, aperture is AV. It's kind of represented the same way, I believe, on Sony as well, and Nikon. I'm not 100% sure if it's like the things. Generally speaking, it's all very similar, whatever. So like shutter speed mode, when you have it in shutter speed mode, specifically allows for you to adjust the shutter speed, which is the length of time that the shutter is open. It goes in like, you know, there's like fractions all the way into like full seconds, like fractions of a second into full seconds. Basically, the longer it's open, the more light comes in. Anything, I want to say, like under 1/50th of a second gets kind of scary when you're handheld, in terms of like getting camera shake. So, you know, if you're walking around handheld, be wary of that. And then aperture is the opposite of that. It basically, you set the aperture, which is the amount of light that comes into the hole. The smaller the number of aperture, which is like, okay, let's say you have like an f1.4 lens. Looking into the lens, f1.4 is the biggest circle, which gives you the lowest like focal plane. Like, I mean, it essentially, like, if you're taking a picture of something, you'll get the image and the background won't be in focus. And then the higher the f-stop, the more of the entire image is going to be in focus. And so that determines, like, you know, stylizing or what you're trying to shoot or how you're trying to shoot. But when you're in aperture mode, it sets the shutter speed. So the shutter speed becomes automatic. When you're shooting in either of those modes, you just have to be wary of, like, where your ISO is at, how fast the shutter speed is, or how fast the aperture is, and then it essentially, you know, it can affect the image. So like if you're taking a picture of 3/4 of a car parked at a car show or something, and your aperture is wide open, at 1.4 the back wheels of the car might not be in focus if you focus on the front half of the car, depending on, like, you know, how your camera, like, autofocus works or whatever like that. As far as manual exposure is where you're basically watching the exposure meter, and then you set your shutter speed and you set your aperture, and then you essentially get whatever you want out of the camera. Don't let that cripple you. Don't let people tell you you have to shoot manual or you have to shoot this way or that way. Essentially, whatever gets the job done gets the job done. That's really what it all comes down to. End result is the end result. Learning manual will obviously help you understand why things do what, but don't be scared of shutter speed mode. Don't be scared of aperture mode. Just try and get out and shoot as much as possible, and it'll all start to make sense, you know, in time. And like it's hard for me to like really explain it, and I'm sure there's a million videos on YouTube explaining exactly what this is or whatever, but I'm trying to, you know, give you a little bit of the game, and hopefully it makes sense. And so the last thing is like ISO. ISO is like International Standard Operation. It's like the film speed. It essentially comes down to like when people used to shoot film cameras, you'd put a certain film speed in for like what time of day or what you were going to do, and like if you were going to go out on a sunny day, you'd run like ISO 100 film, or if you're going out in, like, you know, in the evening time, you'd do like 400. If it was nighttime, you'd run like a higher ISO, so on and so forth. Basically, it's just the amount of time it takes to expose the image. As you typically get higher in the numbers, the more noise you get, because it's like digitally taking in like quicker or whatever, and it digitally makes the image the way, you know, like with a little bit of grain and whatever else. But so that's why people shoot with like tripods at night, so they can run a lower ISO and get less noise. Hopefully that made sense. I was kind of like stumbling a little bit, but, you know, I'm trying to like explain it all out in the gist of a long, you know, how basically DIY basics video here. So the other thing, kind of outside of that, is white balance. White balance is getting the colors as neutral as possible. I mean, that's essentially what you'd white balance for. You can set the white balance, or you can shoot auto white balance and then try to fix it in post after. It just depends on what you're trying to do. If you're doing composite images where that's multiple images put together, you probably want to shoot in a set white balance so that all of your images match. So that helps in the post-processing, you know, in the process after the fact. And then that gives you a little bit more control over what you're trying to do. Or if you're trying to achieve something, or pull like oranges out of a picture, or like add blues or whatever, just getting the colors the way you want them to look in camera, that's where you would set like in the white balance. The Sony cameras have like a grid, and you can go all through it and set it crazy. The Canons are just temperature colors. Like if you're in the cars, like HIDs, like you can get like 3000 HIDs, which are like yellow, all the way to like 10, which is like that purple color. So you can set it the exact same way in camera with the same temperatures. I just wanted to like quickly touch on this too. There's a right way and a wrong way to hold a camera. So like if you're walking around, like this is how you'd want to hold it, like this. Like, so you're from the bottom and you're bracing the bottom of the camera, and then you can adjust like this. It just gives you a better, you know, like a better brace on the camera to hold it more sturdy. There are people that hold it like this, but like then all the weight comes on this hand, and it's not as steady. You basically don't want to do that. You want to always be on the bottom side. Same thing for vertical grips, hand still on the bottom. If you don't have a vertical grip, some people do like this, or, you know, whatever's comfortable, but essentially that's, you always want to have your hand underneath to like just hold it steady. And then kind of moving forward a little bit on, you know, going back to like camera stuff and post-processing, I always recommend shooting raw. It's basically like a digital negative, like essentially like having film before you take it into a dark room. Shooting in raw gives you a bigger file with more data that allows for you to make more adjustments in post, and, you know, you get to pull and push a lot more of the shadows and highlights, whereas you may or may not lose detail if you shot JPEG only, because there's less data there. That's helpful as you start to post-process stuff, and it's real important to like not like shoot yourself in the foot when it comes to post-processing. I know there are a lot of people who just come into photography who make a lot of excuses about post-processing. they try to say, oh, well, I don't want to use Photoshop, or I don't want to use Lightroom, or I don't want to do this. I want to get everything right in camera. And that's awesome that you want to do the best you can in camera. But basically, as you progress through it, you'll realize the dudes that are really making the money are the dudes that took post-processing as seriously as they did when they were shooting on scene. So don't try to cut corners while you're shooting out on the field, and don't try to cut your post-processing either. You need a good balance of both to really like make yourself a solid photographer. It's the same thing. If it wasn't for Photoshop, you'd be in a dark room with film, and the dudes who really understood how to process the film in the dark room were always the ones who got better footage out, or better image quality, or better images in general, with dodging burning, cloning, cleaning up, cutting, whatever, doing all the craziness that they did. So, you know, hopefully that makes sense as well. And then speaking on like shooting, you know, there's filters and stuff that will really help as like an automotive photographer. The basic one that I'd recommend is like, the first one always is like a UV filter. Let me pull this thing off just so you can see it. Hopefully it'll go back on. A UV filter is just like a clear, like simple lens filter. Essentially, like, let me put this down real quick. Here, oh, there you go. Essentially, those are just, people do them just to protect their lenses. Some people use them, some people swear by them. I run them because I drop things and I bang stuff around. It's just a real protecting type of thing. That's kind of like the main focus of what people use those for. Next up is like a polarizer. Polarizers are like these. This one is a Hoya, or no, sorry, this is a B&W, a B&W filter. That's like 60 bucks on Amazon. It's for a 77mm lens. Basically, what these do are cut reflections out of the cars. If you're shooting a car and you're noticing there's like a ton of reflections in the side, or you really want to control the light, you'd use a polarizer, and it basically like allows for you to like see through glass, or like cut a lot of the reflections out, control your exposure a little bit better. If you're compositing, you use the camera on a tripod, and then you do multiple polarizations where you make small incremental turns, and then you can polarize across the whole car to get the car evenly polarized. Because this may or may not only get like half of the car or a quarter of the car. So that's kind of where people go with those. Next thing is an ND filter. This is like, you can see how it can literally go dark. I don't know if you can even see it, but anyways, this is a variable ND filter actually, and what it does is like, it has like a variation in like darkness basically, and it'll allow for you to shoot like during the day and get slower shutter speeds. And what that's mostly useful for in the automotive world is shooting like rolling shots or like panning shots. Like if you're doing motorsports and let's say you're out at Formula Drift and you want to shoot like panning shots of the cars, but it's bright daylight, you'd run one of these in kind of like the darkest setting, and as the cars are going by, you can run a slower shutter speed, something in like the 1/115th or 1/25th of a second range at a low ISO, and get the cars blurring by. Whereas that wouldn't be possible if you didn't have an ND filter. And the other thing I was going to show you guys is a step ring. This is a step ring right here. I have one on this lens already. This is a 77mm lens. 77mm filter, and my Sony lens is a 67mm filter. So this is a step-up ring of 10mm. I put this ring on the front element of the lens, and then it allows me to run a bigger filter, and not for any other reason than saving money, because that filter is like 60 bucks. The ND filter I have is like 200. I don't want to have to buy that for multiple lenses, so I can just run a step ring, and then that really just cuts down on some of the cost. I don't think a lot of people ever really pay attention to stuff like that, but that's kind of like something that I've done, you know, throughout the years of just having different size lenses and just being able, just wanting to save money coming along. On to the next thing, like I'm not really going to touch on this too much. Lighting is a big thing, like in terms of like external lighting, not just like natural light or like long shutter speeds in the dark, but like light painting, shooting with strobes, the different types of stuff like that. Like, I mean, you can spend a ton of money doing this stuff, and I'll have a whole nother video going into a lot of this. But you can buy like Alien Bees, which are like cheaper strobes, or you can buy like super baller stuff like Pro Photo, and the price difference is like crazy. I mean, you're talking like a $300 strobe to a $2,500 strobe. And I'll show you guys the difference and all that stuff later. And then same thing with light painting. I'm still working on that light painting tutorial. I was waiting for my buddy to come down from New York, do some stuff with me, like, you know, some other pro guys, and really get you guys a really cool tutorial with some other dudes that, you know, a lot of automotive photographers respect and love. So I think that would just make for a better video, you know. So, but in terms of that stuff, you can shoot light painting stuff with a house light. You can do it with a floodlight. You can do it with your strobe in a softbox with a modeling light on. You can do it with an ice light. You can spend a ton of money doing, or a ton of money or no money at all light painting. You just need a tripod and just something to shoot with, and you know, it's a whole nother video in itself. But it's long shutter speed, walk across the screen, long shutter speed, you know, natural exposure or whatever with no light, and then you merge them all together and get your perfect exposure out of that as a composite image. I guess next thing I want to talk about was apps. I basically made a list, if you wonder why I keep looking over at the thing. I have a list that I'm kind of going through. As far as apps go, I mean, the primary industry standard for photography is Adobe Photoshop and Lightroom. Some dudes don't like Lightroom and use Capture One. That's another software. They both work fine. I like Lightroom because I pay the monthly subscription fee to Adobe. So if I already have it, I use it. It works fine on my computer. It's not slow or anything like that. Essentially, you know, you can catalog and organize and get your photos kind of situated in Lightroom. You make your base adjustments, and you can copy and paste your adjustments across multiple images, or you can use presets or whatever, you know, whatever you feel is necessary to get it ready in Lightroom. And then you open your image in Photoshop, make your major adjustments. If you got a clone, I feel like cloning's a lot better in Photoshop, by the way. And make your adjustments in Photoshop, cleaning up the ground, cleaning up the background, making sure everything fits together, compositing images, putting everything together the way it needs to be, and then taking it back to Lightroom to finalize your image and save it how you need to save it. That's how I work. Some people will tell you to do different things. It's totally up to you. Final product is all that matters anyways, you know. As always, like, that's all your client cares about, the final image. But that's where my workflow goes. Lightroom, Photoshop, back to Lightroom, just for color adjustments, making sure everything's fine, cleanups, that type of stuff. If you don't have all of that stuff, you know, you don't have a computer that's powerful enough to do whatever, you know, don't shut yourself out. There's tons of apps for iPhone or Android. A lot of people use like VSCO for coloring. Some people use Facetune, which is like an app for people to like clean up little spots and details, clone some stuff. And then if you want flares and cool stuff like that, there's a free app for iPhone called Lens Distortions. Lens Distortion has a bunch of flares. You can literally layer just like in Photoshop and add light leaks and flares and all kinds of craziness and make your images more, you know, more like interesting or more dynamic. And don't limit yourself. But you know, that's kind of my advice there. And I mean, really take the time to learn Photoshop if you can. Lightroom and Photoshop, that's like where I'd suggest you spend your time. But if you can't, don't discourage yourself. There's plenty of other things that you can do in the meanwhile until you get to that point. Then, you know, as far as like running a tripod, you can, that's another thing that like I wanted to like touch on really quick before I kind of ended this video. I use a Manfrotto tripod. I'm actually using it to hold up the Adamus right now, which is what I'm recording this to. But like, I have a Manfrotto tripod. I use 190 legs. You can look that up. They're nothing crazy. They're the smaller legs. You can get bigger legs, which is like the 055s. It's all about preference and budget and everything. You can use a cheap tripod. It's not anything crazy. You just, as you get into crazier tripods, you get different heads. Like I use, which is kind of on the tripod right now, sadly. I use a magnesium ball head, which allows me to just like rotate the camera around. I prefer that. It's very easy to adjust on the fly, and it just makes it real simple and quick. I do have this one here, which is like a pan tilt. I did not like this tripod. It just really got on my nerves with like, you know, just sticking and flicking back and forth. So I didn't really like it. And then I have a video head tripod, which is like a fluid head, which allows for like up and down, which I showed you in the last video if you're watching the slider video. That tripod head is only good for video stuff. I wouldn't recommend buying a fluid head or anything like that unless you're going to shoot video stuff. And I really think, you know, I think that's really it for like the basics in terms of like getting yourself going and starting out. Basically, I mean, just essentially, I just don't want you to discourage yourself from not having a ton of gear, but I also want to explain and show you guys some stuff. Hopefully this video helped. I mean, you want me to kind of explain stuff a little bit better, I can. I'm not really sure. Like, I just wanted to touch on everything kind of quickly and kind of give everything like a simple breakdown. I'm not 100% sure if this was good or not, but yeah, hopefully you know enjoyed it. And part two of this video will have like more focus on compositing. Composition, compositing, some more lighting, like rule of thirds, just situation stuff. And I really want to do in-depth photography videos, like where I'll do individual things, like I'll show you guys night photography, or I'll show you like very specific things that have to do with automotive photography, because that's what this channel is based around. So hopefully this helps. Let me know what you guys think in the comments, and thank you guys. I'll see you guys soon. Let me fix my shirt. Do it one more time.